Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as we divide and move some perennials. So let's go. We're currently on the south side of my house and I'm in what I call the side walkway flower bed. It is the middle of September and the temperatures have cooled here in New Hampshire. It is a perfect time for me to divide and move some plants. When it comes to perennials, spring as well as fall are a perfect time to divide your perennial plants. So let's get started with this project. We have a number of plants we're going to divide today. Before we start, I just want to show you a few plants in this area. This right here is called Joe Pye weed. It is so beautiful and I want you to notice its color late in the season. There are also a few beautiful annuals in this flower bed. They are proven winter plants and I'm going to pop up on the screen their exact name. We have a number of sedum in this flower bed. This beautiful one is called Autumn Joy sedum. Towards the front of the flower bed are a number of dianthus that bloom beautifully during the spring months, and here in the late summer months they are a nice ground cover. We also have a beautiful candy tuft in this flower bed. It also blooms during the spring months and otherwise it acts as a ground cover. What I'd like to see happen in this flower bed is I would like to add some perennials in between each of the candy tuft plants. One perennial that's already there is called Basket of Gold. It's a very small plant. It was just added here recently. And here on the other side of the bed we have two more candy tuft. In between the candy tuft are two perennials that are very close to each other. We're going to be working on those perennials today. One of them is another more established Basket of Gold, and then right next to it is a plant called Pasque Flower or Pasque Flower. So we're going to be working on dividing those and moving those around. In between these two candy tuft plants here is another Pasque Flower. Basket of Gold is a perennial type of alyssum, and you can see this one here was bought on clearance. In fact, this is my sister-in-law's plant. I'm going to get it in the ground for today, and then next spring she can come and we can dig this up for her. But I want to make sure it overwinters just fine for her out in the landscape. Since we have these two perennials in this flower bed and they're not symmetric, they're just kind of randomly put in this flower bed, what I'm aiming for is I want to dig them all out. I want to see how many plants I have to work with, and then once we've divided any plants that we can divide, at that point we can get them placed and planted out in this area. I'm going to pop up on the screen what the Basket of Gold as well as the Pasque Flower look like when they bloomed during the spring months. I'll also put up on the screen when did they bloom here in my Zone 5B climate, just so you know. I'm just going to use a small hand shovel to dig out the plants. I noticed in the spring that the Pasque Flower and the Basket of Gold were very close to each other. They were too close to each other. And I have another Pasque Flower on this side. So I want them in this flower bed, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but I don't want them so close to each other. They do really well in a full sun situation, and this flower bed is definitely full sun. They also don't get very tall, so I like them in this flower bed because when I walk by this area, which is every single day, I will notice them, I will see them, and I won't miss them when they're blooming. I just don't like that they are placed so close to each other. And I also want to try to get more free plants. It's a perfect time of year to be dividing the plants and getting free plants out of them. Now that I've moved the mulch aside, I can take my hand shovel. I don't want to dig right at the base of the plant. I don't want to ruin the crown of the plant. So I can dig out 1 or 2 inches away from the base. I'm going to dig down and then over. And then I'm going to remove some of the soil because I just want to see what we're working with when we're dividing the plant. I have a small little bucket here. I can just place all my plants in there temporarily. I'm fairly new to both of these plants. So when it comes to like the Basket of Gold, I didn't cut it back right after it was done blooming. And when I'm looking at it right now, it looks like it's pushing out new growth from the base of the plant. That tells me I probably should have cut it back as soon as it was done blooming in the springtime. I'm almost positive Basket of Gold is considered a short-lived perennial. So for that reason, it's a great plant that you want to divide often, because if the plant dies out, the mother plant or the initial plant dies out, you'll at least have a succession of plants going. In fact, I think I had Basket of Gold years ago, and I didn't know that. I just had one plant, and then eventually I lost the plant. Sometimes when it comes to our garden spaces, it's almost easier to remove plants, think about it a little bit, and then replant them. And that's what I'm doing here. I know that these plants are going to come back in this flower bed. I just don't know how I want to do it in terms of spacing them. So it's just easier for me to dig them all out, divide them, and then see how many plants I have to work with. And then based on that number, I can place them accordingly. I'm just going to level the soil out. I'm sure we'll be planting back in this area, but for right now, let's just put all the mulch back and we can come back and plant in here afterwards. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to dig out this patch of the Pasque Flower, and then right nearby, I'm going to dig out this small patch of the Basket of Gold. And then after that, I'll show you what's next. I live for this time of year. In the springtime, we're busy. We're doing a lot of things in our garden. It's a great time to be dividing perennials in the springtime, but sometimes you don't get to all the plants that you want to divide and move. So then you have to wait all summer because it's just too hot to be really dividing and moving plants. Now it's late summer, early fall. Here the temperatures have cooled down. I really want to get these plants divided, moved around, and I want those roots to establish themselves. And for today's project, I'm happy with just these 2 plants, pulling out 2 plants from a space, looking at what we have, dividing them if we can, and then getting them placed back in that garden bed with the hope that next year they're going to put on a fabulous show. So come in for a closer look. I want to show you what we have to play with. Let's see what we can divide. I had this one plant that is also a Pasque Flower, and it was down in my backyard plant nursery. I put it there temporarily. It's a temporary holding spot basically for plants that I want, and I don't know where I want them to go. The question is this the same color Pasque Flower as these ones? You know what? We're going to find out together next year. So I went ahead and pulled that out so that we can get this planted today. But let's start with this plant here. For the Basket of Gold, we're going to start with cleaning it up. There's definitely some new growth towards the bottom of each branch here. So we're just going to come in and we're going to cut back any of the scraggly growth that doesn't look very good. And like I mentioned, I'm not that familiar with this plant. So when it comes to the pruning of it and when to prune it, that's something that I'm still learning. But it's pretty obvious, pretty clear right now what should be cut back. Any of these pieces that look dead should be cut back. And any of the pieces where it's green and it's new fresh growth, for right now we're going to leave it. One of my goals for next year is to research it a little bit more, and probably I'm guessing that had I cut it back harder in the springtime after it was done blooming, it would have pushed out a lot more fresh growth at the base. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you have either of these plants in your yard, and if so, have you ever divided them or collected their seeds? And also, when it comes to something like Basket of Gold, you'll have to let me know, how do you take care of it? Do you prune it back as soon as it's done blooming? It's going to take me a while to go through this whole plant and clean it up. So let me finish cleaning it up, and then after that, let's see if we can try to divide this plant. I honestly felt kind of bad cutting back a lot of this green growth on the top. But honestly, it was looking very leggy. It did not look good. And the growth habit for this type of plant is typically you want it to be more of a compact type of plant, not so leggy. So even though I did cut off a lot of it, I did keep some growth still on there. It's, like I said, a learning process for me. So for this year, I think this looks better now than it did before. I was looking at it a little further and thinking to myself, do I even want to divide this plant? It has a very woody base to it, and I was tugging at it to see if it would fall apart. And it really didn't. But what I noticed was a few little pieces came off when I dug it up. So really, if you do want to divide this plant, try to take off little pieces like this, and that will create a new plant for you. So for this more established plant, I'm just going to leave it as is. So then what we're left with is this one that's still in a pot. We have this guy over here, and then those 2 little pieces that I showed you. So let's take this out of the pot. It seems like if you do want to divide this type of perennial alyssum, the best time to do it is when they're young like this. I also next year want to experiment with trying to collect the seeds from it, as well as trying to take some cuttings from it and rooting the cuttings. I'm just taking off some of the soil from the bottom here because there's quite a bit of soil and we don't need all of that. And I'm thinking I want to have a total of 4 of these plants. We have the one larger woodier plant. We have these 2 plants. That makes 3. Well, these don't really count. So let's go ahead and just divide one of them. I'm going to use a hand pruning saw. This one's by Corona, but there are a lot of different brands out there. I'll put a link to it down below in case you're interested. I love using something like this when it comes to dividing a lot of my perennials. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it right down the middle. We can pull that apart. And each section should just have some roots on the bottom as well as some top growth. So now we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 sections we can play with. For placement, what I'm going after is we have a candy tuft here, we have another candy tuft there. So I'm placing each of these basket of golds in the middle, but pushed back a little bit, with the intention that we're going to put the Pasque Flower towards the front of them. So we have 1, 2, the third one there, and then we have our 4th one there. Let's go ahead and get these planted. Usually this time of year, I like to put some sort of a fertilizer to help the roots get established. And I prefer to use Espoma Biotone Starter Fertilizer. However, I recently planted a bunch of perennials, and in the planting hole for each of those perennials, and the perennials were a serendipity allium, I came out the next day and each one was dug up. Not only the serendipity allium, but also some dianthus. I wondered if the Espoma Biotone Starter Fertilizer was attracting some sort of a rodent. I'm not quite sure, so I don't want to take my chances at this point. I don't want my perennials to keep getting dug up. So that's why I'm not putting any sort of starter fertilizer in the planting hole like I usually like to do. I'm going ahead and just making sure that the roots are beneath soil level and that the crown of the plant is at soil level. And then I can go ahead and backfill. The soil is nice and wet because there is drip irrigation in this bed. If you were planting this in very dry soil, you'd want to make sure you're giving the plants a very good drink of water. You can do that before you put the plant in the planting hole, or you can do it after you put the plant in the planting hole. I'm just pushing down, and then I can replace the mulch. We are currently experiencing drought-like conditions in New Hampshire, so I may end up giving this supplemental water on top of the irrigation that they get on a daily basis, just so the roots can establish themselves. Now that we have the basket of gold planted, and some pieces are definitely pretty small, but they'll grow. We just need to give them time. What I'm thinking is I would like to put the Pasque Flower towards the front. And since we have more of the Pasque Flower, what I was thinking is we could put one over here and one over there, at least to start with. So we would put 2 in each section on either side of the basket of gold, but more towards the front. And we would just repeat that pattern as we go down this way. But let's go ahead and see how many do we have to play with and how many can we divide them into pieces, because maybe we have more than the 8 that we need. This is such an interesting flower. I just think it's so pretty, so unique. When I was reading about it, I'm pretty sure I saw that it might be considered native in certain areas. So where you live, you'll have to look it up. It might be actually a native plant. So we know we're starting with these 3 plants, and then we have this one here. Let's go ahead and take this out of its container pot. This piece is pretty small. I don't dare divide it down more than it already is. So we'll leave this one as is. But we know that we want to have 8 plants. So we have 4 here. Let's go ahead and start dividing. The general rule when you're planting out in the landscape is to plant in 3s and 5s. But honestly, I just want to plant in a way that I think will look pretty in my garden. I say that a lot in my videos, that yes, there are rules when it comes to gardening, but you don't have to necessarily follow them. It's just advice that's given. I'm trying to see if I can tug or pull this apart. It's not easy, but I'm feeling like as I just keep tugging at it, it's starting to slowly fall apart. This is not a plant that I would feel comfortable coming in with a shovel and cutting right down the middle, because it seems a little bit, again, it has more of like a tight, woodier type base. So I'm slowly trying to just tease it apart. And that looks like a really good division. I wanted to bring this in closer to you so you could see. We basically have just one large root here. And when you look at the bottom of it, there are a number of growth points. But I wouldn't want to divide this down any more than this, because really it's just one root right here. So we're going to leave this plant as is. It's technically just one root, so one plant with multiple growth points. My husband once said to me, when we divide perennials, isn't it just the same thing for all plants? Part of the reason I love showing you my process for dividing plants is it's not always the same thing. It's going to vary from plant to plant. So we're going to call this one plant. I'm going to move it aside. I'm looking to see if we can divide this one down any further. But I noticed a small little sprig fell off right here. So technically, this is a plant if we wanted it to be. So on the top, you can see it looks very full. And you might think, wow, you can get so many plants out of that. But again, if we look at the base, the woody base, and if I just turn it around, I would say you could probably turn this into 2 plants and not much more than that. So right here, I could take something like my hand pruning saw and I could cut right here. But I'm going to try to pull it apart first. Again, I'm trying to be as gentle as possible because I want to make sure each division has a good amount of roots if possible. So this guy, that's what the top growth looks like. And when we look at the bottom, it has some roots there. So that's a nice division. And then here's its sibling, the other half of it. That also ended up with a nice set of roots. They are definitely pretty woody, so we wouldn't want to divide this down more than that. So we turned that one plant into 3 plants, technically 4 if you want to include this little guy, but let's just call it 3 plants here, and we're going for 8. This is the one that was in the pot, so that's number 4. And now we have this one over here. I just want to show you what the bottom looks like. Technically, these plants are not very large plants. Normally, you might wait another year or 2 to divide them. But I want to have 8 plants, so I'm trying to go after dividing them a little bit. With this plant here, we're going to try to turn it into 2 plants. I'm looking at the base of it, and I see that we have some roots over here, and then we have this larger root over here. I have tried to pull it apart, and it's not easily falling apart for me. We're going to come in, we could come in with either hand pruners or a pruning saw and cut right in here. So I'm just going to cut with my hand pruning saw right here. And actually that came off pretty easily. So we have a nice division right there. And I want to show you, even though this guy here has a lot of top growth, and you would think, oh wow, we can divide that into multiple pieces. Let's look at the base of it. And if you look at the base of it, really there's just one main section with root. You wouldn't want to divide this down much more than that. Or at least I wouldn't. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So I counted everything. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this tiny little guy, 8. We're going to go with it. Let's go ahead and start planting these. One thing I want to mention is I know I have a spring blooming bulb somewhere in this area. The question is where in this area? You know how it is with spring bulbs. They're ephemeral, they die back. I know that they're somewhere in here. What we're doing for this year is we are preparing this bed. We are putting plants that should do well in this area. The question is next year, as those spring bulbs start coming up, will we need to move some of these plants a little bit? Maybe they need to be moved back a little bit. Maybe they need to be moved left or right. That's all part of gardening. But I don't want to wait until the spring to see the placement of all those spring bulbs and then not plant anything right now. I would rather get these planted now, and then next year, when those spring bulbs come up, we can always adjust accordingly. We may end up coming in because the spring bulbs are all in here. We may end up taking some and not having any in between these plants here and only having them over here. That's all part of the planning process. And I think that's what makes gardening so fun, is just moving things around as we need to. One of my goals for this garden bed is that I want to have a lot more perennials that come in bloom at different times of the year throughout this bed. And I want different heights. I want to have shorter plants towards the edge of the bed, and then I want to have taller plants towards the back of the bed. So we're getting one step closer to achieving these garden goals that I have for this particular flower bed. This is what I like to call faith in gardening. We just need to wait and see what happens with these plants, these two plants that we have placed in here. They were in the right area of my bed. It's just the placement of them, the spacing of them was not how I wanted them to be. And I wanted more. I wanted more of these plants, but I didn't want to go to the store and buy them. I knew that I have enough to play with to make some sort of an impact in this area. And when we talk about impact can take a few years, but with a little bit of patience, it's so worth it. When the spring larkspur pop up in this area, as well as the bloodroot, because bloodroot is also in this general area, we'll have to see how they play together. And if they don't play well together, well, the name of the game is to move plants around. I will absolutely bring you along and give you an update in the spring. I'll show you how the plants are looking. I'm anticipating maybe some of them might not bloom next year. Maybe they all will bloom. We're not quite sure. We'll have to wait and see. I hope this video inspired you and gave you some ideas for your own garden. Even if you don't have these two particular flowers in your yard, look around your garden space and see how can you make some edits. It's a perfect time to be doing that. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.